There are books that history remembers, and then there are texts that history tries to hide behind a veil of ritual and silence. Most of what you've heard about the origins of the world's most famous secret society is nothing more than modern myth and hollow speculation. But buried beneath the surface lies a specific record, a foundational manuscript from the era when the craft was first truly organized, that contains the raw, unedited blueprint of a hidden lineage. This text wasn't written for the public. It was written to preserve a science of the soul that dates back to the very dawn of human civilization. It speaks of lost pillars of wisdom, celestial geometry, and a code of silence that was once punishable by more than just social exile. Today we are moving past the rumors and the sensationalism. We are opening the vault to look at the actual content of the 1717 record, the narrative they don't want to show you because it reveals the true power held by those who know how to build beyond the stone. If you're ready to look at the world through the eyes of the ancient masters, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a discovery from the forbidden archives. In the dim light of history, before the great institutions of the world took their modern shape, there existed a singular collection of knowledge that sought to bridge the gap between the divine and the terrestrial. When you look upon the authentic records of the year the Grand Lodge was formed, you are not merely looking at a rulebook. You are staring into a mirror of antiquity, a narrative that claims to trace the very lineage of human thought back to the dawn of time itself. The text begins with a profound assertion that the craft of Masonry is not merely about the shaping of stone, but is synonymous with geometry, the primary science that governs the movements of the heavens and the structures of the earth. The manuscript recounts a story of survival that borders on the supernatural. Long before the great empires of the East arose, there was a man named Lamech. He had 4 children who were credited with the birth of human civilization. One son discovered the art of geometry and the craft of building with stone. Another mastered the harmony of music. A third refined the secrets of metallurgy, and their sister pioneered the art of weaving. These were not viewed as simple trades, but as the 7 liberal arts, the keys to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. However, a shadow loomed over this golden age of discovery. There was a prophecy, a deep-seated knowledge that the world would undergo a total purification, either by the cleansing heat of fire or the crushing weight of water. To ensure that the wisdom of the 7 liberal arts was not lost to the void of time, the children of Lamech undertook a monumental task. They did not build temples for themselves, but rather they constructed 2 massive pillars of profound significance. One was made of marble, intended to withstand the fury of fire, for marble will not burn. The other was made of a specific type of brick or lathyrus, designed to float and remain intact even if the world were submerged in a global deluge. Upon these pillars, they engraved the entirety of their scientific findings, their geometric proofs, and the fundamental laws of the craft. They were creating a library for a future they would never see, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to let the light of knowledge be extinguished. The manuscript reveals that after the great cataclysm, the flood that reshaped the face of the earth, it was the legendary Hermes, the father of wisdom, who discovered one of these pillars. He found the ancient carvings and translated the secret signs back into a language the survivors could understand. This is the core of the Masonic tradition, the idea that the knowledge we possess today is a recovered treasure, a fragment of a lost perfection. The text describes this as the founding of the craft, where the physical act of building became a sacred duty to preserve order in a chaotic world. As we read through these descriptions, the text offers a glimpse into why this was kept so closely guarded. It states that the science of geometry is the ground of all things, implying that those who understood the relationship between points, lines, and surfaces held the blueprint of creation itself. The manuscript does not treat this history as a myth, but as a literal inheritance. It speaks of Nimrod, the mighty builder, who employed these recovered secrets to construct the great city of Babylon. He is described not as a tyrant, but as a master who loved the craft and gave his workers their first charges, a set of moral and professional codes that defined how a builder must conduct himself. This was the moment the craft moved from being a solitary pursuit of knowledge to a structured brotherhood. The master told his workers they must be true to one another and serve their lord for his pay, establishing a system of mutual respect and integrity that predates modern law. To the authors of this hidden record, the world is not a collection of random occurrences, but a masterpiece of deliberate design. As you delve deeper into the text, you realize that the foundation of every secret held within the lodge is built upon a single sacred pillar, the science of geometry. The manuscript does not merely treat this as a subject of study, it presents geometry as the very language of the Creator. It is described as the science of all sciences, the primordial root from which all human understanding grows. To the early brothers, to know geometry was to peek behind the curtain of the physical world and glimpse the blueprints of the universe itself. The text goes to great lengths to explain the 7 liberal arts and sciences, which were considered the only paths to true enlightenment. It speaks of grammar, which teaches a man to speak and write truly, rhetoric, which allows him to speak elegantly, and logic, which grants him the ability to discern truth from falsehood. It mentions arithmetic, the secret of numbers, music, the harmony of sounds, and astronomy, the knowledge of the celestial bodies. Yet the manuscript makes a startling and bold claim. All of these arts are entirely dependent on geometry. It insists that there is no man that works in any craft, but he works by some measure, and there is no measure made without geometry. This is the core revelation of the book. It argues that the harmony of music is simply geometry made audible, and the movement of the stars is geometry made visible across the heavens. In the narrative of the manuscript, this science is not a human invention, but a divine gift. It is the first science, the one that existed before all others, and the one that will remain when all else fades. The text describes how the master builders of old used these geometric truths to transform raw, chaotic nature into ordered, beautiful structures. But there is a deeper, more esoteric layer here. The manuscript suggests that the stones we see in the great cathedrals are merely symbols for the human soul. Just as a rough stone must be measured, squared, and polished to fit into a grand archway, the human character must be refined by the square of truth and the compass of moderation. The book reveals that the ancient masters were obsessed with proportion. They believed that if a building was constructed according to the laws of divine geometry, it would become a conductor for higher energies, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. The manuscript whispers of the golden rule of architecture, where every line and every angle serves a purpose far greater than mere stability. It teaches that geometry is the ground of all crafts, meaning that whether you are a weaver, a smith, or a king, you are subject to the same unchanging laws of balance and symmetry. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear why this knowledge was so jealously guarded. To understand geometry was to possess the power of creation. The manuscript suggests that those who mastered these secrets could build structures that resonated with the very fabric of reality. It speaks of the square not just as a tool of wood or metal, but as a moral imperative, a rule of life that ensures a man's actions are always in alignment with the truth. The compass is described as the limit of human desire, reminding the initiate to keep his passions within the bounds of reason. This section of the text challenges the reader to look at the world differently. It asks you to see the geometry in the leaf of a tree, in the curve of a wave, and in the proportions of the human body. It tells us that the great architect used these very tools to set the foundations of the earth and the limits of the sea. By learning the craft, the brother is not just learning a trade, he is learning to think like the Creator. The manuscript emphasizes that this science is the most worthy, for it never lies and never changes. In a world of shifting politics and fading empires, the truth of the triangle and the circle remains eternal. This is the hidden light that the 1717 text promises to those who have the eyes to see, the realization that the universe is a temple and we are both the builders and the stones within its walls. The transition from the abstract beauty of geometry to the tangible reality of a physical structure marks a turning point in the hidden manuscript. The narrative shifts its focus toward the most significant architectural endeavor in human history, the construction of the Great Temple in Jerusalem. In the eyes of the early brothers, this was not merely a building of stone and cedar. It was the physical manifestation of the divine order they had studied in the stars and the shapes of the earth. The manuscript describes this period as the moment when the craft reached its absolute pinnacle, a time when the wisdom of the ancient pillars was finally put to the ultimate test. The text recounts how a king of immense wisdom sought to build a sanctuary that would serve as a house for the divine. However, to achieve such a feat, he knew that local knowledge alone would not suffice. He looked beyond his borders, reaching out to the neighboring king of Tyre, a ruler who possessed the finest materials and the most skilled craftsmen in the known world. This alliance between two monarchs, one providing the vision and the resources, the other providing the skill and the substance, is presented as the perfect model for the brotherhood. It represents the union of power and knowledge, of intention and execution. At the center of this narrative stands a figure of profound mystery and mastery. The manuscript speaks of a master of the work, a man sent from Tyre who was filled with a spirit of wisdom and understanding. He was not just an architect, he was a master of all the secret sciences. The text describes him as a man who could work in all manner of work, whether it was the casting of great bronze pillars or the delicate carving of intricate symbols. He is the archetype of the true Mason, someone who has mastered both the physical tools of the trade and the intellectual secrets of the universe. Under his guidance, the construction site became a living laboratory of order and harmony. One of the most captivating details in the manuscript is the description of how the workforce was organized. Imagine tens of thousands of men working on a single project, yet there was no confusion, no noise of iron tools at the site, and no discord among the ranks. The text explains that this was made possible through a strict system of hierarchy and secret recognition. Each worker was assigned a specific role based on his level of skill and his mastery of the charges. This is where the manuscript reveals the true purpose of the secret signs and tokens. They were not just for show. They were a sophisticated language that allowed a man's worth and rank to be instantly recognized by his peers, regardless of the language he spoke. The manuscript stresses that the stones were hewn and squared in the quarries far away, so that when they arrived at the holy site, they fit together with such precision that the joints were invisible. This is used as a powerful metaphor for the brotherhood itself. Each man must be prepared in private, refining his own character and skills, so that when he joins the collective, he fits perfectly into the grand design without the need for force or friction. The sanctuary thus becomes a symbol for the ideal society, where every individual knows his place and contributes to the beauty of the whole. As the building rose, the master of the work established the first formal regulations of the temple. These were not just technical instructions, they were moral decrees. The manuscript notes that the workers were commanded to live in peace with one another, to avoid all slander, and to treat their fellows with the same respect they would show a king. They were taught that the quality of their work was a direct reflection of the quality of their souls. To do shoddy work was more than a professional failure. It was a spiritual betrayal of the craft. The text concludes this section by describing the completion of the sanctuary and the immense glory that filled the halls. It suggests that because the temple was built according to the true laws of geometry and the sacred charges of the ancients, it became a place where the barrier between heaven and earth grew thin. For the reader of this 1717 manuscript, the lesson is clear. The Temple of Solomon is never truly finished. It is a perpetual project that every brother must continue within his own heart. The tools and the techniques used in Jerusalem are the same ones we are invited to use today to build a sanctuary of truth in a world of shadows. It reminds us that when we work with integrity and precision, we are not just building for ourselves, but for eternity. Once the dust of the construction site settles and the physical walls of the sanctuary are raised, the manuscript shifts its gaze from the external world to the internal landscape of the man himself. It reveals that the true strength of the brotherhood does not lie in the hardness of the stone, but in the ironclad character of those who handle the tools. This section of the text introduces what are known as the moral charges, a strict, uncompromising code of conduct that transforms a mere builder into a silent brother. This is the blueprint for a life lived with purpose, a set of laws designed to ensure that the peace of the lodge is never disturbed by the chaos of the outside world. The manuscript begins this moral instruction with a profound and revolutionary decree regarding a man's conscience. It states that a brother is obliged, by his very tenure, to obey the moral law. In an age of deep religious division, the text makes a startling move toward universality. It suggests that while every man may have his own private opinions on the divine, the craft only requires him to be a good man and true, a man of honor and honesty. The manuscript describes the lodge as a center of union, a sacred space where men who might otherwise have remained at a perpetual distance can find common ground. By stripping away the labels of the profane world, the text seeks to create a bond that is thicker than blood and stronger than any political or religious faction. Central to this code is the concept of brotherly love. The manuscript is explicit about the duties one member owes to another. It commands that you must not only respect your brother's person, but also his reputation and his livelihood. There is a powerful warning against supplanting a brother in his work. If a man has begun a task, no other should attempt to take it from him, unless he is truly incapable of finishing it. This ensures that the spirit of competition, which so often poisons human relationships, is replaced by a spirit of mutual support. The text notes that all preferment among Masons is grounded upon real worth and personal merit only, meaning that in this world, your advancement depends solely on the integrity of your character and the skill of your hands. Then the manuscript moves into the shadows, addressing the most famous aspect of the craft, the duty of secrecy. It instructs the brother to be cautious in his words and carriage, so that even the most prying stranger cannot discover what is hidden. This is not presented as a game of hide and seek, but as a rigorous exercise in self-discipline. The tongue of good report is a recurring theme. The text insists that a brother should speak well of his fellows behind their backs, and if he cannot speak well, he should remain silent. This silence is a shield that protects the harmony of the group. You are commanded to avoid all private piques or quarrels, especially those concerning religion or politics. The manuscript is adamant. These subjects are forbidden within the walls of the lodge because they have never failed to bring discord to nations, and the lodge must remain a sanctuary of absolute peace. The moral charges extend far beyond the meeting room and follow the brother into his home and his community. The manuscript offers a stern warning against excess and riot. A brother must not spend his time in gluttony or drunkenness, but must lead a life of moderation so that his family is not neglected and his ability to work is not impaired. He is told to walk honestly and soberly in the world, acting as a living advertisement for the virtues of the craft. Even when dealing with a brother who has fallen into error or lawless behavior, the text advises a path of compassion and correction rather than immediate castigation. You are to whisper good counsel in his ear, attempting to bring him back to the path of the square before the world discovers his fault. This section of the manuscript concludes with the weight of the old charges, emphasizing that these rules are not suggestions, they are the very conditions of membership. To violate the code is to break the sacred tie that binds the brotherhood across generations. The 1717 text paints a picture of a man who is a master of his own passions, a reliable friend, a loyal subject to the laws of his land, and a silent guardian of the ancient truths. It teaches that before you can hope to build a temple for the divine, you must first become a pillar of virtue yourself. The code of the silent brother is thus a manual for the perfection of the soul, ensuring that the light of the craft is never dimmed by the shadows of human weakness. When the heavy doors of the lodge are closed and the outside world is barred from entry, a transformation occurs. The manuscript moves from the moral conduct of the man in the streets to the precise architecture of the sacred space where the brothers meet. This inner sanctum is not merely a room with four walls, it is described as a microcosm of the universe itself, a symbolic representation of the world as the great architect intended it to be. The 1717 record reveals that the very orientation of the lodge is a key to its power. It is traditionally situated from east to west, following the path of the sun, which brings light and life to the earth. To enter the lodge is to step out of the darkness of ignorance and into a space governed by the eternal laws of light and reason. At the center of this sacred architecture stands the furniture of the lodge. The text mentions that 3 great pillars support the structure, known symbolically as wisdom, strength, and beauty. Wisdom is required to contrive the work, strength to support it through the trials of time, and beauty to adorn it so that it reflects the harmony of the spheres. These are not physical columns of marble, but the spiritual pillars upon which the entire brotherhood rests. The manuscript explains that the master of the lodge sits in the east, representing the rising sun, to open the lodge and set the brothers to their labor with good and wholesome instruction. The wardens represent the strength of the midday sun and the beauty of the setting sun, ensuring that the work is conducted with order and that the workers are satisfied with their wages of knowledge. The narrative goes into meticulous detail regarding the requirements for those who wish to cross this threshold. It is not a place for everyone. The text is very specific. A candidate must be free-born, of mature and discreet age, and of good report. To be free-born meant more than just legal status. It implied a man who was the master of his own mind, someone who was not a slave to his passions or to the whims of others. This is the first secret of the architecture. The stones used to build this living temple must be of the highest quality. A flawed stone can bring down an entire archway, and so the masters of the craft were tasked with the solemn duty of vetting every soul that sought admission. The manuscript warns that no man shall be accepted a brother, but such as have a good reputation, for the integrity of the whole depends on the purity of the parts. Within this sanctum, the tools of the builder take on a life of their own. The manuscript describes the working tools not as implements of toil, but as mirrors for the mind. The square is the tool used to test the accuracy of a corner, and in the lodge, it represents the square of virtue, ensuring that every action a man takes is honest and upright. The level is used to find the horizontal plane, symbolizing the profound truth that we meet upon the level, acknowledging that despite differences in wealth or status, all men are equal in the eyes of the Creator. The plumb is the tool of the vertical, the line that points toward the heavens, reminding the brother to walk with rectitude and to keep his integrity unshaken by the storms of life. These tools are the jewels of the lodge, and the text suggests that they are the only true ornaments a man needs. The layout of the floor itself is often described as a mosaic pavement, a checkerboard of black and white. This is perhaps one of the most striking visual elements the manuscript touches upon. It represents the duality of human existence, the light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow, the good and the evil that make up the fabric of our lives. By walking upon this floor, the brother acknowledges that he lives in a world of contrasts, but the compass of his reason allows him to navigate the middle path. The manuscript teaches that the trestle board is where the master draws his designs, and for the initiate, this represents the divine plan that he must learn to decipher through study and meditation. As you read through these descriptions, you realize that the architecture of the lodge is designed to be a silent teacher. Every angle, every tool, and every position of the officers is a lesson in how to live a structured, meaningful life. The text emphasizes that the lodge is a place of peace, where the clashing of swords and the noise of the profane are never heard. It is a laboratory of the soul, where the rough edges of human nature are smoothed away by the constant application of geometric truth. The inner sanctum is therefore the heart of the mystery, a space where the ancient charges are not just spoken but lived, and where the master of the work continues to guide the craft toward the completion of a temple that no human hand could ever truly finish. The most revolutionary and perhaps most misunderstood aspect of the hidden 1717 record is its bold vision of a universal human bond. In an era when the world was fractured by deep-seated religious animosities and bloody conflicts over dogma, the manuscript presents a vision that was nothing short of a spiritual earthquake. It outlines a concept that would become the very soul of the craft, the establishment of a center of union. This was a sacred space where men who, by any other standard, would have been sworn enemies, could lay down their swords and their prejudices at the threshold to meet in a spirit of absolute harmony. The text suggests that while the world outside is divided by the accidents of birth, the nation one is born into, or the specific creed one is taught, the lodge is governed by a higher, more ancient law that transcends all earthly borders. The manuscript is strikingly clear about the religious requirements of a brother, and its words are carefully chosen to reflect this new, inclusive spirit. It states that in ancient times, Masons were charged in every country to be of the religion of that country or nation, whatever it was. But the 1717 transition brought a profound shift. The text now declares that it is deemed more expedient only to oblige them to that religion in which all men agree, leaving their particular opinions to themselves. This religion in which all men agree is not a new set of dogmas or a hidden cult. Rather, it is the fundamental moral law that exists in the heart of every honorable human being. It is the belief in a great architect of the universe, a title intentionally broad enough to allow a man of any faith to look toward the heavens and see the same divine source of order and geometry. By removing the specific labels of sect and denomination, the manuscript created a sanctuary for the mind. It commands that no private piques or quarrels about religion or politics must ever be brought within the door of the lodge. The authors of the text understood that these two subjects, faith and power, have caused more strife and bloodshed in human history than any other. By forbidding their discussion, the craft ensures that the universal bond remains unbroken. The text emphasizes that a Mason is a peaceable subject to the civil powers, wherever he resides or works, and is never to be concerned in plots and conspiracies against the peace and welfare of the nation. This was a vital protection, allowing the brotherhood to exist as a quiet, stabilizing force within any society, regardless of the prevailing political winds. One of the most moving parts of this section is the description of the brotherly love that should exist between men of different nations. The manuscript suggests that a brother from a distant land, speaking a foreign tongue and practicing a different faith, is to be received with the same warmth and sincerity as a neighbor. This is the universal language of the craft, a system of signs and tokens that allows a man to prove his worth and his dedication to the moral law without saying a word. The text speaks of the mystic tie that binds the global fraternity, asserting that Masonry is the center of union and the means of conciliating true friendship among persons that must have remained at a perpetual distance. This is the core of the forbidden knowledge, the realization that humanity is one single family, and the lodge is the laboratory where we practice being brothers. The manuscript insists that the only true qualifications for entry are to be good men and true, men of honor and honesty. By focusing on these internal qualities rather than external labels, the 1717 record challenges the reader to look past the surface of things. It teaches that the square and the level apply to all men equally, regardless of whether they wear a crown or a commoner's cloak. This message of radical equality and tolerance was, at the time, a direct challenge to the rigid hierarchies of the profane world. It proposed a world where a man's value is measured by his contributions to the great work of building a better society, rather than by his lineage or his specific theological beliefs. In this light, the universal bond is not just a social club, it is a profound ethical commitment. The text reminds the brother that his duty to the craft is to be a citizen of the world. This means that his loyalty to the truth and to his fellow man must always come before his personal biases. The 1717 manuscript invites us to imagine a world where the walls of the lodge expand to encompass the entire earth, turning the whole of humanity into a single, harmonious temple. It is a vision of a religion of humanity, where the only creed is kindness, the only dogma is truth, and the only ritual is the constant improvement of the self for the benefit of all. This is the light that the 1717 text seeks to spread, a light that shines through the darkness of division and lights the way toward a truly united human race. As you reach the final layers of this ancient record, the tone shifts from the beauty of geometry and the warmth of brotherhood to something much more solemn and formidable. This is the moment where the manuscript reveals the gravity of the commitment one makes when crossing the threshold of the lodge. It speaks of the sacred tie, a bond that is not merely a social contract, but a spiritual marriage between the individual and the eternal traditions of the craft. To enter this circle is to leave your former self behind and to take upon your shoulders the weight of the secret. The text makes it clear that this secret is not something that can be written in books or whispered in corridors. It is a lived experience, a hidden light that can only be understood by those who have stood in the center of the lodge and bound themselves by the solemn obligation. The manuscript describes the moment of the oath with a sense of profound awe. A man must kneel, stripping away the distractions of the outside world, and place his hand upon the volume of the sacred law. Here, he makes a promise that is intended to last as long as his breath remains. The core of this promise is summarized in the ancient command to always heal and ever conceal. The word heali is a remnant of an older language, meaning to cover or to hide, as one would cover the foundations of a building. This is the first duty of the brother, to be a tomb for the mysteries. The manuscript insists that the signs and tokens, the points of entrance, and the hidden words must never be revealed to the profane world, not even under the greatest of pressures. This silence is the primary test of a man's character. If he cannot govern his own tongue, he cannot be trusted to help build the temple of humanity. Then, the text touches upon the most chilling aspect of the 1717 record, the symbolic penalties for betrayal. The manuscript uses vivid and dramatic language to describe what happens to a brother who violates his oath. While modern scholars view these as symbolic of the moral death a man suffers when he loses his honor, the 1717 text presents them with the weight of ancient law. It speaks of the tongue being torn out, of the heart being plucked from the chest, and of the body being buried in the sands of the sea, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours. These descriptions are not intended to be literal threats of violence, but rather to illustrate the absolute nothingness that awaits a man who betrays his own word. To the early brothers, a man without honor was already dead. He was a cowan, an intruder, a person of no substance who had no place among the living stones of the craft. The manuscript also introduces the figure of the tiler, the guardian who stands outside the closed door of the lodge with a drawn sword in his hand. His duty is to keep off all cowans and eavesdroppers, and to ensure that only those who are duly qualified may enter. This sword is a constant reminder that the secret is protected, and that the boundary between the sacred and the profane is absolute. Within the lodge, the bond is further solidified by the 5 points of fellowship, a physical and symbolic ritual where brothers meet hand to hand, foot to foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, and hand over back. The text explains that these points represent the total commitment to support a brother in all his needs, to fly to his aid, to pray for his welfare, to keep his secrets as your own, and to support him with your very life if necessary. As the record concludes, it reminds the reader that this bond is eternal. Once a man has taken the oath and the light has been revealed to him, he can never truly leave. He is a perfect ashlar, a stone that has been shaped and fitted into a structure that spans across centuries and continents. The 1717 manuscript finishes not with a goodbye, but with a reminder of the great work that remains. It suggests that, while the temple of stone may crumble, the spiritual temple built by the Brotherhood is immortal. The weight of the secret is not a burden, but a crown, a mark of a man who has mastered himself and has become a part of something far greater than his own brief life. This is the final revelation, that the ultimate secret is not a word or a sign, but the transformation of the man himself into a pillar of truth that the world can neither shake nor destroy.